First, they associated Iraq to 9/11 via a fictitious meeting, and this lie would grow to associate both with anthrax attacks. And that lie would grow into a general lie about chemical and biological weapons, mobile labs, etc., and eventually into a more general lie about weapons of mass destruction, and before you knew it, we were at war, again. War is by deception. The source of these lies were Israeli intelligence and a Zionist cabal nestled inside the Bush administration. We'll be going over the PNAC cabal in more detail later, but first we'll look at just some of the lies coming from a couple of PNAC goons, Gary Schmidt and William Crystal. Watch how the master liars weave one deception into the next. William Crystal and Gary Schmidt both wrote pieces called Iraq Al-Qaeda Connection, trying to link Iraq to Al-Qaeda. Gary Schmidt referred to Fred Barnes from the Weekly Standard, saying that the Czechs had given him a photograph of Atta meeting in Prague with Iraqi officials. They kept repeating this line again about the Prague meeting between Mohammed Atta and Iraqis. Fred Barnes wrote a piece called Mohammed Atta Was Here, in which he accused the meeting of happening and having photographic evidence for it, as well as alluding that the Iraqis may have passed biological, chemical, or even nuclear weapons to Al-Qaeda. Of course, no such photo existed, because Atta was never there, and the Iraqis had no biological or chemical weapons to give. But this Zionist cabal would not be the only ones to try and make these claims. The Israelis would also do so, which we will cover later. It is clear that Israeli firsters within the U.S. falsely linked Iraq to the 9/11 attacks. This would be done so again in the letters for the anthrax attacks, which were also initially blamed on Al-Qaeda, which read "Death to America" and "Death to Israel." I think you can start to see the clear picture coming around here. This isn't simply a case of the Israelis using a crisis to their advantage. Israeli Mossad agents were living next door to Mohammed Atta. They knew very well what was about to happen. The military-industrial complex is multinational. Regional privateer cells comprise an international ring of rent-a-terrorists for the continuity of government, and this is where the missing money is. Key players in the U.S. had legislation pre-written ready to push through Congress the moment after the crisis began. Karl Rove once professed that it didn't matter what reality was because they could make reality. And that's exactly what they did and what they rephrased as message force multipliers, an old tactic borrowed from Nazi propaganda about repeating a lie enough times until the most prejudiced or insecure among the populace start to believe it. If they can get 5 or 6 people to repeat the same lines in different places in the press, regardless of how lacking in evidence the claims are, it will create the perception that everybody is saying X, so X must be true. This lemming effect works particularly well with scare tactics, and it is used over and over by the mass media as a form of deception or distraction. Here is who all kept repeating the Iraq is with Al-Qaeda lie, as well as the compounding lies that they merged with it. Once again, not a shred of evidence to back any of this up. Pure scare tactics. Same as the Iran is going to build a nuclear bomb propaganda.
These monstrous lies were told by embedded Zionist journalists who worked with the administration's PNAC members. For example, the lie that the lead hijacker 9/11, Mohammed Atta, met with agents of Saddam was repeated by William Safire of the New York Times, May 9, 2002, which came from Gary Schmidt, who wrote it in 2001 for PNAC in the Weekly Standard run by William Crystal, the chairman of PNAC. The story was leaked to Rutgers on September 18, 2001, just 7 days after the attacks. Wow, they knew about the lead hijacker as well as the meeting that never took place within 7 days. Reminds me of the BBC report on Iraq that was plagiarized from a college student in Florida. This Atta met with an Iraqi official lie was repeated by Dick Cheney on national television December 9, 2001. He later denied it in spite of being on tape saying it.
You have said in the past that it was, quote, pretty well confirmed.
No, I never said that.
Okay. I
never
think
said
that is...
That's absolutely not. What I said was, it's been pretty well confirmed that he did go to Prague and he did meet with a senior official of the Iraqi intelligence service in Czechoslovakia last.
So ignorantly called the Czech Republic by its old name, Czechoslovakia. One would think that if they had a report, which they had read, out of a country, that they would at least know the correct name for that country, but he didn't.
In Czechoslovakia.
What's sad is Cheney's considered to be one of the smarter ones, and he is, for a neocon. I mean, the competition isn't fierce.
Gary Schmidt of PNAC wrote, shortly before getting on a plane to fly to New Jersey from Europe in June 2000, Mohammed Atta, the lead hijacker of the first jet airliner to slam into the World Trade Center, and apparently the lead conspirator in the attacks of September 11th, met with a senior Iraqi official. This was no chance encounter. Rather than take a flight from Germany where he had been living, Atta traveled to Prague, almost certainly for the purpose of meeting with the Iraqi intelligence operative Ahmed Samir Hani. This was a complete lie designed to connect Iraq to Al-Qaeda and to the 9/11 attacks. It was false. Yet all the networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, repeated it anyway because it had been in the New York Times. The source for the Times reports were members of the Iraqi National Congress, such as Ahmed Shalabi, a man convicted of bank fraud, and the person who Wolfowitz had personally suggested should lead the INC back in the 90s, when he wrote then-President Clinton about regime change. William Safire, who made the bogus report, was awarded a Guardian of Zion Award in 2005 for his defense of Zionism in Israel. He also got the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Bush in 2006. It's their way of saying, good job. What the neocons were doing is planting stories from known false sources on willing journalists and then quoting them as sources for what was in reality their own lies to begin with. In this triangle, the Office of Special Plans told the INC what to say, and then the journalists claimed them as sources, and then the Pentagon quoted the journalists.
Of course, the Prince of Darkness was a message force multiplier. December 28, 2001, in an op-ed in the New York Times, Richard Pearl wrote, "We must strike Iraq. Evidence of a meeting in Prague between a senior Iraqi intelligence agent and Mohammed Atta, the September 11th ringleader, is convincing." Another PNAC troll, Paul Wolfowitz, added, "Like the meeting of Mohammed Atta with Iraqi officials in Prague, I think the premise of a policy has to be we can't afford to wait for proof beyond a reasonable doubt." February 23, 2002, in the San Francisco Chronicle. Pearl was the chairman of the Defense Policy Board in the DoD and involved in too many other criminal activities to get into just yet. Paul Wolfowitz was the Deputy Secretary of Defense and later the head of the World Bank, and also involved in too many crimes to get into just yet.
They can get away with it. It's like they want to be caught. They are laughing at you. For those of you who actually need to see the lies about weapons of mass destruction that the mainstream media and the neocons repeated over and over, I will give you this rather famous YouTube clip.
There are a lot of people who lie and get away with it. And that we will in fact find weapons or evidence of weapons programs that are conclusive.
I don't think we'll discover anything myself.
It appears that there were not weapons of mass destruction there.
You said you knew where they were.
I did not.
We know where they are. They're in the area around Tikrit and Baghdad and east, west, south, and north.
Well, first of all, I haven't lied.
There are a lot of people who lie and get away with it.
Talking about lies and your allegation that there was bulletproof evidence of ties between Al-Qaeda and Iraq. Was that a lie?
Intelligence gathered by this and other governments leaves no doubt that the Iraqi regime continues to possess and conceal some of the most lethal weapons ever devised.
Our people are going to find out the truth, and the truth will say that this intelligence is good intelligence, no doubt in my mind.
I don't know anybody that I can think of who has contended that the Iraqis had nuclear weapons.
And we believe he has in fact reconstituted nuclear weapons.
Saddam Hussein is determined to get his hands on a nuclear bomb.
We cannot wait for the final proof.
He's got him. He's got him.
The smoking gun
He's got him.
that could come in the form of a mushroom cloud.
Colin Powell didn't lie.
My colleagues, every statement I make today is backed up by sources, solid sources. These are not assertions. What we're giving you are facts and conclusions based on solid intelligence.
He has not developed any significant capability with respect to weapons of mass destruction. He is unable to project conventional power against his neighbors.
Saddam Hussein aids and protects terrorists, including members of Al-Qaeda. Secretly and without fingerprints, he could provide one of his hidden weapons to terrorists or help them develop their own.
What did Iraq have to do with what?
The attack on the World Trade Center.
Nothing.
He said there were three main reasons for going to war in Iraq. Weapons of mass destruction.
Saddam Hussein has gone to elaborate lengths, spent enormous sums, taken great risks to build and keep weapons of mass destruction.
The claim that Iraq was sponsoring terrorists who had attacked us on 9/11.
Before September the 11th, many in the world believed that Saddam Hussein could be contained.
And that Iraq had purchased nuclear materials from Niger.
The regime is seeking a nuclear bomb.
All three of those turned out to be false.
First, just if I might correct a misperception, I don't think we ever said, at least I know I didn't say, that there was a direct connection between September the 11th and Saddam Hussein.
Who does the president think he's effing kidding?
Of course, it was information that was mistaken.
There are a lot of people who lie and get away with it.
Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere. Nope, no weapons over there. Maybe under here.
When you have a precedent set like that, and you have somebody, George Tenet, acknowledging in his book that he knew that the administration was deceiving the American people into a situation that is murdering young men and women from this country and others, that George Tenet and Dick Cheney and Condoleezza Rice and George Bush et al. Should be in fucking jail.
I'm tired of hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
You got to figure out what to do with all of the debris.
How about you? You made money off the Gulf War! And now you're going to vote for your fascist son! Old lies! More lies! Still lies! Stop the lies! Stop the lies!
Andrew Todd Jr.
It is important stuff.
Also working with William Safire at the New York Times was Judith Miller.
She made up the lie about Iraq's aluminum tubes allegedly being used as centrifuges in a nuclear reactor. Never mind the fact that that wouldn't physically work anyway if it was true. That doesn't seem to matter. I already explained to you that these people aren't very bright. But they don't worry about that, you see. They know that it doesn't really matter how bad their lies are. They're going to be accepted anyway because their entire role is to just facilitate some sort of pretext for war. Miller was also the journalist that spread the lies about Saddam having weapons of mass destruction under his palaces or in mobile trucks. And her boyfriend, Louis Libby, Cheney's chief of staff, compounded that lie, as well as lies about Iraq's alleged anthrax. 9/11 was the new Pearl Harbor event the neocons yearned for, and it was 9/11 that acted as the catalyst for both war and sweeping pre-written legislation to create